Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, during this budget hearing, there was a particular item on the budget that received bipartisan support. And as much as there may have been some certain dramas associated with that item, it still received bipartisan support, and fortunately, unfortunately, or otherwise, was later line item vetoed by the governor. At that time, there were certain members, certainly of the Republican Party, that had, let's say, disparaging comments with respect to the governor's decision to line item veto that particular addition. The governor, however, did state that with respect to that, she would support the efforts. Those efforts would be providing funding for African American historical sites in Kansas. With that, I have an amendment.
The amendment appears short. Would you like to explain your amendment? The clerk will read.
On page 149, following line 1 by inserting Historical African American Cultural Business Districts, $5 million, provided that expenditures shall be made by the above agency for such account to assist in the restoration of historical African American cultural business districts within the identified qualified areas in Nicodemus, Wichita, Kansas City, Quindaro, and Topeka. On page 266 in line 26, by subtracting $5 million from the dollar amount and by adjusting the dollar amount in line 26 accordingly. On page 267 in line 25, by subtracting $5 million from the dollar amount and by adjusting the dollar amount in line 25 accordingly, and by adjusting the amounts accordingly if multiple amendments are adopted.
Representative Carr, you may proceed.
Thank you. After that veto, there were several statements that were made by our Republican leadership with respect to the not acceptance or the line item veto, and a few of those I'll read. Politics has been put ahead of priority. A historical site important to African American history should never be one of those things. I'll continue reading. Preserving the archaeological integrity and educational importance should be a bipartisan priority and excluded from the wrath of political punishment. I would say I'm doing one better. The $250,000 that was added last session was, in my opinion, insufficient. So therefore, I am requesting a $5 million figure that doesn't just focus on one particular area, but it focuses on 4 areas throughout the state. And I'll stand for any questions.
To speak on the amendment, the chair recognizes Representative Waymaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if you recall, last year we had a very similar item, but it was just into one particular area, and the dollar amount was $250,000. And when the governor vetoed that, in the veto message, it was because it didn't go through the regular process and everything. And you can question whether this is going through the regular process. I mean, granted, yes, we're having a debate on the House floor. But when you talk about the regular process, it's, going through committee, which is what her statement was last year when she vetoed it. Now we're increasing this to $5 million coming from, and the last amendment was the same. However, that amount we could cover, but $5 million coming from the debt reduction fund prohibits us from paying off debts, which is what the governor has been advocating this session. $5 million is a little bit different than $250,000. Yes, now, granted, yes, I know it's covering more areas than the proviso we had last year, but if this passes, we can't pay off some of the debt that the state has. So I would ask you to vote no.
Does any other member wish to speak to the amendment? Seeing none, Representative Carr, you may close.
I stood here last year and I posed some of the same questions that the representative before me posed about the timing, why it hadn't gone through the regular process. However, last year, that was not an issue. I even stated that what was different now than any other time, that fell on deaf ears. So I wonder again, what's different now? And I understand that there is a more significant dollar amount associated with this amendment, but I'll also state that it was a virtual embarrassment, the amount that was listed in last year's edition. I have requested an amount that can actually get something done. Some movement can actually be made and something can take place in more than just one singular area. Earlier today, one of my colleagues mentioned the fact that there were funds that would be allocated and located in a single area and not looking at it across the state. I say to you that those places that I mentioned cover a large portion of the state with respect to African American historical and economic areas. And with that, I ask that you support this amendment in the same fashion that it was supported in this body last year and subsequently vetoed by the governor. If that's what she intends to do, then we'll allow her to do that. But I would ask my colleagues that they support this and it pass out of the House at this time. And with that, I close.
You've heard the motion by Representative Carr to amend. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The noes appear to have it. The division has been called. The clerk will open the roll and you may vote. Seeing 15 hands, a roll call is in order. Has every member had the opportunity to vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member wish to change their vote? Seeing none, 35 voting in favor and 80 against the amendment fails. We are back on the bill. For further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Hoagland.